I wonder, Lars, if you want to start first by explaining to us how Milan managed to maul Madrid on Tuesday night.
The answers that really spring into mind there for me are all to do with Real Madrid. But I mean, we want to talk about Milan, so let's start on what they did right, as opposed to what Real Madrid did wrong in this game. And I think there were a few things that really stood out. First of all, there was a kind of bravery to their performance. They were not afraid to take the ball and play the ball and be patient and pass themselves out from the back. They didn't seem cowed by the occasion of playing at the Bernabeu at all. This part of it was, of course, aided by the fact that the Real Madrid forwards seemed to just kind of decide that pressing is not a thing we're going to have to do here. That obviously makes it quite a lot easier to play out from the back. But Fonseca also did a couple of little clever things. I think something like playing Yunus Musa on the right and having him almost kind of sit alongside Emerson Royal for a lot of the game. I think, you go into a game against Real Madrid, like however they do it, whether it's Vinicius playing out there or whether Mbappe goes into those areas, you know that your right back is probably going to have a bit of a difficult day, because all the strength of Real Madrid is down the sort of left-hand side, cutting inside, causing havoc. So you want to reinforce that side. Emerson Royal, as we know from his time in the Premier League, can be a little bit accident-prone. And I thought Yunus Musa did a great job helping him out. And down that side, they were able to stop most of what came. And then, of course, on the other side, huge performance by Rafa Leao, who's a player we've talked a lot about on this pod, because he's obviously extremely gifted, but has at times not fully lived up to his billing, neither in terms of talent nor in terms of wage packet at this point. But and sometimes you start wondering with this guy, why are they persevering? But this game was a reminder of like what Leao can do at his very, very best, and it was a thing to see.
Yeah, I think the Leao point is really interesting, Lars, because he has been one of the figures of their season without being one of the best players of their season. And if you think of the tricky start that Paulo Fonseca has had, and there's no doubt that he's had a tricky start. It's not the first time he's had a difficult start at a big club. I remember, as I probably mentioned on the show before, speaking to Sergei Palkin, who's the CEO at Shakhtar Donetsk, and he said we considered sacking him after 5 games. And he went on and won 3 successive leagues. Not necessarily suggesting that he's going to do that at Milan, but you get the point. And because he's got such a particular way of playing, because it's quite a bold way of playing, as you said, and because there's quite a lot of technical information for players to take on board in both a tactical and an individual sense, I think there can be a little bit of time. Now, I think the other thing is with Rafa Leao, he, and to a lesser extent Theo Hernandez, have been the figures of the season so far, because the way that Fonseca's dealt with them has been controversial, I think it's fair to say, because he's left them out when he's felt that they haven't pulled their weight, or he's got better alternatives. And these are the best paid players and the best players, but certainly outfield players. Because, of course, Mike Maignan, who's the real leader, had another brilliant match in this game. So there's something politically tricky about leaving them out. There's no getting away from that. And I realise we're not in the era of Berlusconi anymore, but still, it is important, especially as Lars says, when you're paying Rafael Leao in particular so much money. Now, if you look at this game, it's tempting to think Fonseca, and it's a small sample size, has just played his hand perfectly, because they have gradually improved as the season's gone by. They're looking in a good position now. I think their first 11 looks really, really good. And also the fact that you have to say, coming into this game, Rafael Leao hadn't started in the league in a month. And that is a big deal, to sort of realise you're going to put that pressure on your shoulders because you realise it's the right thing to do for the team. Even if it is the right thing to do for the team, it's quite easy not to do, because you think, okay, well, I'm going to get a load of stick about this from the media, and it's going to have to be something I'm going to have to traverse. But in fact, he's put him into the team for this massive game, and he's gone, okay, go and prove to me what you can do. And that front three was terrific in this game.
And this is like 100% hindsight on my part. I'm not saying this was obvious or something I would have made up myself, but you look at it now. What is the scariest thing about Real Madrid? Like I said, it's clearly their left-hand side. We'll get into it in a minute. You've got two guys who kind of want to do the same thing there, but like whether it's Vinicius or Mbappe running at you, like coming left into center, that's a scary thing. So you reinforce the right-hand side. You tell your right-sided midfielder, Musa, to hang back a little bit more, defend a little bit more. Where can you attack? What's their weakness, Real Madrid? The current Real Madrid. I mean, the fullback area is a problem, and particularly with Carvajal missing. Lucas Vázquez is a good soldier, but he's not a great right back. So you bring in Rafa Leao. Like whether you have some questions about like his attitude or whatever has not worked with him so far. Clearly, if you have a winger who has the kind of dynamism and technique he has, and you know the opposition are playing with sort of a utility guy slightly out of position in right back, you want him on the field. And we saw, I mean, he had him on toast, as they say in the UK, all night. I mean, he could cause so much trouble down that side.
Well, you as we're talking about Fonseca and Rafa Leao, obviously they didn't get on initially, did they? From what I understand. So Fonseca must have had to sort of bite a pill, a bitter or sweet pill, to overcome that part, and Leao as well, perhaps. As well. But the thing that struck me was how Fonseca told his players to go out there and enjoy themselves. I mean, this is Real Madrid. Go out and enjoy yourself. That makes it sound as if they made it look easy. And I think they did, didn't they, Andy?
I don't know if they made it look easy in the end, but what they did so well, because bear in mind, Real Madrid, and maybe we'll come on to them a little bit in a minute, have not been brilliant in this season's Champions League. What they have been is explosive in small bursts. You think that opening game against Stuttgart, they should have lost. Stuttgart were a better team than them, and Real Madrid end up winning 3-1. They're 2-0 down at home to Dortmund at half-time and end up winning 5-2, scoring all the goals after the hour. And Dortmund, I suspect, are still scratching their heads a little bit about that, notwithstanding Real Madrid's otherworldly technical quality, particularly in attacking areas. But I think what Real Madrid, what Milan did that was so impressive is not that they got themselves into a lead, but that they managed the game so well when they were in front. I think that was the important thing. Now, they did need a really good game from Maignan. I don't think we can get away from that or skate over that, because Real Madrid did have some chances. You know, that's what he's there for. He's one of the best goalkeepers in the world, and why wouldn't you lean on him a little bit, I suppose? But I think when we're talking about this team evolving and Fonseca gradually getting them to where he wants to be, I think we have to look at the midfield as well, because Tijani Reinders has been like really unbelievable. Not just because of the third goal, and it was a beautifully constructed and finished third goal, but he's turning into one of the best midfield players in Europe. I don't think you can get around that. The other thing is the protracted transfer saga that eventually ended up in Youssouf Fofana leaving Monaco and coming to Milan, because he is a player they pinned their hopes on. They stuck with the deal for longer than other clubs would have, because it was a real fiddle. And they got there in the end because they wanted him so badly, and that they just stuck with it. And he wanted the move so badly as well. We have to say that. But what that meant is it really affected his pre-season. And especially for a player with that sort of athletic volume, I think that's a big problem. So it's taken him a while to get to the point where he's someone that Milan can come back to and come back to and come back to. And that's what they're doing now. And I think the way that they dealt with that, like the defence was very good, as Lars said, but I think the midfield in front of that has shown real form. And I think, interestingly, the double sub that they make, or that Fonseca makes just before Reinders scores the third goal, is quite interesting, because they bring on an extra man in midfield. Loftus-Cheek and Abraham come on at the same time, and Abraham made his little contribution as well. But to have that sort of quality to bring off the bench and shore up the midfield anymore was absolutely vital, and I think really showed that coach and team were on the same page.
I just very quickly, I think what Dalton said about them being told to enjoy themselves and not be cowed by the occasion is kind of key here as well, because you mentioned the Dortmund game. Dortmund also were all over Real Madrid. And then you got to halftime in that game, and there was this feeling when they came out again that they'd realized, oh my God, like we're winning at the Bernabeu. This is something. And like the whole approach kind of changed, and Nuri Sahin made a sub we didn't really agree with, and they kind of sat back a little. Yeah, it took off the winger who was causing all this trouble. And they sat back, and Milan didn't really change their approach in that sort of way. They just kind of kept going, and I think that was the right thing to do. Also, just in general, but I think it's such an important win, not just because like winning away at Real Madrid is a big thing in any footballer's life, but because they haven't been that bad in the league, I don't think. They've had a couple of results break against them that could have gone the other way. I mean, it's a little bit early for me to fire up the XG bat signal here, but I'm going to do it.
Do it.
I mean, 10, 11 games in, it's a big enough sample size that we can start looking at it. The XG difference has them narrowly fourth, but on really the same number as Juventus, who are third. So they're just behind the two best teams so far in Serie A on the XG. So while they are down in seventh in the table, in terms of the underlying numbers, it's not bad. Like they're just kind of right behind the two front runners there on those numbers. Now, what you'd need then, if what you're doing is fundamentally not terrible, or at least yielding decent performances, if not the results you want to see just yet, it's really good to have a big morale-boosting win to get everyone on the same side, to get everyone believing in what you're doing, because you can tell people you're doing the right things, but having a statement win in front of the eyes of the world makes them feel like you're doing the right thing, and that's important.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Madrid then, because you've already touched on it, Lars, but we have to say, don't we, that Carvajal being injured with what looks like a really serious injury, by the way, one of these cruciate ligament injuries on his knee. He's going to be out for some time, I can only imagine. But not being there is clearly a weakness, contributes to a weakness in Madrid's defence, doesn't it? Because their defence was partly why Milan were able to score 3 goals. Sometimes they were bumping into each other, to be frank. So can you see Madrid going forward? How much of a problem have they got in defence, Andy?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, Don, because, of course, after this game, a lot of people have concentrated on getting the blend right between Vinicius and Mbappe and Bellingham, which I don't think is a defunct question at all. It's a work in progress, and it was always going to be a work in progress at this stage in a season. You know, we've been through the frustration with Bellingham stage because he's not getting himself in the advanced positions as much. Now we're getting in the Vinny and Mbappe making the same runs stage, which I would have thought happened a little bit earlier.
Or not making runs, as the case may be. If they don't have the ball, mostly hanging around, yeah.
Yeah, that's another issue. But I feel these were always going to be issues. But you're right, Dotton, in that the Carvajal injury is something that you couldn't plan for. And it's also, if his goal in the Champions League didn't underline it enough for those at the back, he's really important in terms of his leadership, in terms of how combative he is, all of those sort of things. And as Lars said, Lucas Vazquez is kind of a just for a little bit solution. He's not a guy you can play in every game. Now, this has 2 effects, I think. Firstly, it leaves them a little bit vulnerable down that side. Secondly, Ancelotti knows it leaves them a little bit vulnerable down that side. So who do you get to cover? Federico Valverde. And he could be best used elsewhere on the pitch. So they miss him elsewhere on the pitch. It's a little bit like when, if you go back like 15 years, when there was that season when John Terry was injured and Michael Essien had to play at centre-back for Chelsea. He did it really well, but they really missed him in midfield. And I think that's a bit of an issue. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence, even though he's a very different type of right-back to Carvajal, how there's been more and more chat about Trent Alexander-Arnold in recent weeks, because we know that Real Madrid are interested in him. But are Real Madrid laying the ground to say, could we make something happen in January? You know what? I think it would be really hard to make something happen in January, but they clearly have it on their minds and they clearly know it's an issue. And if they don't get Trent Alexander-Arnold in January, which, as I say, I think will be very difficult, do they have to think of an alternative solution? I think there's an argument for that.
Yeah, 4 games without a clean sheet, Lars. 4 games in a row without a clean sheet for Real Madrid. How concerning would you say that was?
So if I'm going to try to put some kind of vaguely positive spin on it, the awful defeat in the Clásico and this game here, maybe this is a useful wake-up call, because it's still early enough in the season that you can salvage things. And there are clearly things that are not going right at the club that has to be fixed tactically by Ancelotti in terms of figuring out how you get Vinicius and Mbappe to work on the same pitch, because they do like to take up the same positions and make the same movements and all this, and this is something that you have to figure out. But also, and I'm indebted to the inestimable Sid Lowe for publishing these numbers, but basically they're not running enough, Real Madrid. Like, this is the most basic thing in football. They ran 5 kilometers less than Milan in this game.
Wow.
which as Sid points out is an average of 5 lengths of the pitch for each outfield player. That's not nothing in a game like this. And they're actually going into this game, only Slovan Bratislava and Red Star Belgrade had run less than Real Madrid in the Champions League so far.
Wow.
And those are 2 teams that are basically have been pushed back into their own third for most of the games they've played. So they haven't really had the opportunity to run. They're not running. And this is as basic as it gets. You need to put in, even if you're as talented as the Real Madrid are, you need to put the work in. Ancelotti actually said this ahead of the game on Tuesday night. He said, and I quote, "I can't say my players are lazy, but but the reality is that at this moment we are not capable of doing effective collective work," which is a wonderful way of saying they need to make an effort. And I think having a dreadful defeat to Barcelona and having this real sort of loss of prestige home defeat, maybe it can jolt some people into life a little bit in the squad, and maybe it can make Kylian Mbappe realize that he's not in Paris anymore. And maybe there's a few little things that needs to happen with, I think, the mentality of the squad and how they approach things. Vinicius was really bad at times in this game. Like, a couple of times he gave the ball away and he just kind of stood there and like a sulky school child in the playground. This is no good.
He did score a decent penalty.
Oh yeah. All right, I guess that makes it okay.
No, I didn't mean that.
It was like the Ballon d'Or ceremony in that Real Madrid just didn't turn up. Like, it was.
Okay, Andy, you can laugh your head off. What I meant was, if you're going to criticise him, don't forget to give him, some plaudits as well for that. But just on the final note on this subject, I saw Carlo Ancelotti after the match. And he doesn't give much away, Carlo Ancelotti, but there was something in his eyes that told me he was absolutely gutted. I don't know what he looked like after the Barcelona match, but he clearly wasn't happy about something, whether it's the running, and maybe that explains why they've only scored half as many goals this season as their rivals Barcelona have. Barcelona are on 40, they're on 21. But he's gutted about something. This Real Madrid team going forward, not necessarily just in the Champions League, domestically, this season is going to be a hard slog for them, isn't it?
Maybe, but I don't know. I still feel it's quite early. I feel there's a lot to be workshopped. There was always going to be a lot to be workshopped. As you said, the Carvajal injury has thrown something else in there because he is an incredibly influential player. They'll get there. I think you look at that squad, you look at the fact they have one of the best coaches in the competition. If off the back of this result, you've changed your mind and think like the Real Madrid are no longer a contender or no longer one of the contenders or no longer the team to beat in the Champions League, I don't know what to say really, because they'll get there. They've played worse at stages of other seasons in which they've gone on to win the Champions League. So I don't really have any concerns about them. But obviously, because of who they are and because of the players they have and because of the coach they have, every time they lose a game, it's a big deal, especially when it's a game where there's a lot of stuff that they clearly could have done better.